Hey guys, it's Max. We just got in our brand new Note 20 Ultra that I purchased, and today I'm gonna be comparing it to my iPhone 11 Pro Max, and I'm not just gonna cover the typical stuff like specs and performance. I wanna know how good is the display, how good are the speakers, and how good are other things that actually matter in the real world apart from just the raw performance. Now, before we jump in and take a look at all those great things, I wanna give a shout out to our merch. This tee right here, the premium one, is super comfortable. Check it out on the merch shelf down below. And if you need a face mask for yourself, we have a matching one. These things have been selling like crazy, so make sure you go and check that out. Let's get this bad boy opened up. And as I open this, I wanna say that 6 months ago or so, with the S20 Ultra, I was really tempted to switch over to that phone. I really liked it. There were a few things that held me back, such as the slow autofocus system on there. But this time around, I'm gonna be switching over for at least a week and then comparing it to the iPhone experience. And there's a chance that I might just stick with using this Samsung, especially that 5G is really nice for me. So giving you my first impressions, I got the color that kind of matches with the iPhone. It's a little bit darker, but I really love the look here. This thing feels lighter than my iPhone, even though you guys can see how much larger it is. It's taller. So that's very interesting. This camera bump is absolutely massive. The S20 Ultras was big, way bigger than the iPhones. This one, it seems like they made it even bigger. Let me compare it to the S20 Ultra, and definitely the actual unit itself is a little bit slimmer, but it sticks out more. And that's mostly because the Note 20 Ultra, if you guys could tell, is actually thinner than the S20 Ultra. And holding in the hand, the S20 Ultra is way heavier, and it's not as comfortable to hold because of the curved edges and how slim it is on the sides. It actually feels surprisingly lightweight and more comfortable. It's actually a little bit slimmer than the iPhone 11 Pro Max. You could definitely tell that they're taking some design cues from the iPhone with those rings around the cameras. And I have to say, it looks way better than the one on the S20 Ultra. And we can see that little laser autofocusing addition that they added. And that was one of the biggest annoyances with the S20 Ultra, both for photos and videos, was the autofocus was quite a bit worse than the previous ones. So that's gonna be a good improvement. Now, as I mentioned, I like how slim it feels. And one reason is because it has a 4,500 milliamp battery instead of 5,000. I know we're not comparing it to this one. We're comparing it to the iPhone, which has just under a 4,000 milliamp hour battery. But of course, the screen doesn't match up. So this will get a little bit less battery life than your iPhone. Now, to charge them up, it actually comes with the 25-watt charger instead of, let me pull it out here, the 18-watt charger that Apple gives you, and it charges in just over an hour compared to 2 hours for the iPhone. So it charges a lot faster. And if you're somebody that bought one of these 45-watt chargers for your S20 Ultra, it actually won't take 45 watts. If you plug it in with this, it'll still take only 25 watts, just like the included charger, so don't spend the extra money on it. Finishing up with the design, the iPhone has the power button on the right-hand side, which is convenient if you use it, and then it has your volume rockers and your mute switch on the left-hand side. I like how the Note has everything on the right-hand side. Being right-handed, I can turn off the screen, I can adjust the power. Of course, we don't have that physical mute switch, which I really like on the iPhones. Let's go ahead and set up our fingerprint scanner. And I have to say that it actually got fairly good starting with the S20 series. And as you guys could see, this thing works incredibly quickly. It seems like it's faster than before, and you don't even have to turn on the screen in order to turn it on. With the iPhone, you can either lift it up to have the screen turn on if you have the option enabled and then swipe up, or you tap on the screen first and then swipe up. It's really quick, as you guys can see. But with that said, in times like these, if you have one of these awesome, comfortable, breathable Max Tech masks or any other one, it won't let you load up. You have to put in your password. And if you thought about doing a secondary alternate appearance, no, it does not let you set it up. So you're back to the old age of typing in your password each time. Let me tell you, it's very annoying. With the Note 20, you press it, bam, you're in. That is very convenient for times like these. And if you haven't bought one of these, go check out the merch shelf down below. Now, before we compare the displays, which is gonna be interesting, I wanna do a speaker comparison. So get your best pair of headphones. I wanna mention that I did turn on Dolby Atmos on the Note 20 Ultra, which does make it sound better. Let's go ahead and get into it. there you guys go. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Of course, we're recording through a mic. It's going through YouTube, so I'll give you guys my opinions. Overall, wow, the Note 20 Ultra sounds fantastic. Samsung has been doing a great job with their speakers on their tablets, on their phones. They keep improving it. And what really stood out to me is not only is it louder, but the sound is pleasant. The mids sound really rich. The vocals sound very natural, very, very pleasant. The iPhone sounds more harsh. It doesn't sound as full, but there is one area where the iPhone is a little bit better. The bass is a little bit deeper, sounds less poppy, and the speakers are more evenly balanced. It sounds like Samsung this year put a little bit more output on the bottom speaker. It's not bad, but it's not as balanced as the iPhone. Overall, if I had to choose one, it would definitely be the Samsung though. And now let's talk about the displays, and boy, is there a lot to talk about. Right off the bat, you guys see there's a huge difference in the design. The Note uses a square display with very thin bezels, especially on the sides compared to even bezels that are much thicker on the iPhone. And we have this notch here. The iPhone looks like a much older design. This looks more futuristic. And the screen is also quite a bit larger, 6.9 inches, even though that's actually, the phone is lighter and slightly narrower, more comfortable to hold. This has a 91% screen to body ratio. It's the smallest phone with this size of a screen, which is impressive. Now, as far as the quality, the iPhone has a 2.7 million pixel screen. On the Note, you get to choose, and I have it in the mode that has 2.4 million pixels, but you can also go up to 4.4, much higher, but then you're gonna be losing out on one of the key features, and that is the refresh rate. The iPhone does only 60 Hertz, it is stuck there, where the Note 20 Ultra could do 120 Hertz, and not only can it do that, just like the S20, it can actually be adaptive because it's using a new display technology. So if you're watching a 24 frames per second movie, it'll drop down to that to save you battery life. Now, how is the screen quality having a little bit less pixels but a larger screen when you're using that 120 Hertz mode? To be honest, if I'm looking at about this distance, about a foot away, maybe a little bit less, I could tell that the iPhone is slightly sharper when I'm looking at text. At normal distance, a little bit further away, it's gonna be hard to tell a difference. And then of course, if you care about pure quality, which sometimes I would turn on if I'm watching a movie, I would go into that high resolution mode. Now, as far as viewing angles, they are surprisingly very, very close. The Samsung does have slightly more contrast because the screen is a little bit more reflective. Now let's go ahead and max out the brightness on these screens. As you can tell, the iPhone is much brighter, and that's with the high performance mode on, adaptive brightness turned off. Samsung just doesn't let your screen get that bright if you're using the manual controls, especially with a full white screen. If you guys can see right here, if I go into the small mode, it's much brighter here, and then just dims right away to save battery life and heat. Now the iPhone will also dim down if you're outside in the sun and it's getting hot. But the Samsung, if you leave it in that auto mode, it will allow it to get brighter, as you guys can see right here. The Note just wants to know that you actually need that brightness before it gives it to you, so you have less control on the Note. And outside, with the full white screen, they're very similar. With some text, the Note's slightly brighter actually. So if you need the extra brightness, make sure to keep it in that adaptive mode. And now for the final display test, how well do these phones play back videos on YouTube? I have a 4K HDR video open here, and I usually complain that the iPhone will only give you a 1080p option, but with the latest software, we actually can select up to 4K HDR 60 frames per second on my iPhone, which is great. And on the Note, now it's the one that's actually limited to 1440p 60 FPS HDR when you have it in the high resolution mode. So it's actually a little bit lower, but the screen has more pixels. Let's see how that stacks up in actual playback. Wow, this is interesting. The iPhone not only looks sharper because of that 4K oversampling, but the HDR is brighter as well with more contrast. The S20 Ultra is actually a little bit better for HDR than the iPhone, the same iPhone. So I wonder with the latest software updates, if the Apple is pushing the screens more and we have that extra detail, but it definitely does look better. Now, unfortunately, I can't say that much for the performance of the phone. It does not have 5G. 4K is a lot of data. Right here, we're stuck with buffering because it can't handle that amount of bandwidth, whereas the Samsungs, in the last couple times that I've switched over, they do much better, especially with that 5G now. The last thing I have to say about the screens before we go into performance is the fact that with these squared off edges and with the little camera cutout, you see a lot more of the video compared to the rounded edges on the iPhone and with the notch. And now let's get into performance. The Note 20 Ultra has the new Snapdragon 865 Plus, and that's because one of these cores, instead of being at 2.84 gigahertz, now runs up to 3.09. So single core performance should be really good. Let's go ahead and start our CPU benchmark. And here we have it. Surprisingly, the multi-core score is very close. Now the A13 Bionic, which is an almost year-old chip, is still beating out the latest and greatest Snapdragon 865 Plus by a little bit in the multi-core, but the single-core score is over 40% faster. So having that extra core running at 3.08 gigahertz still didn't help out enough, giving the Samsung, the lead, or even getting it close to matching up. Apple is still fantastic with their chips. Now, let's take a look at Antutu, which is gonna give us a broader test. Interestingly, the Note actually looks a little bit smoother, and Vadim just pointed out that it's because it has that 120 hertz screen. Vadim is gonna be doing a detailed gaming comparison, so if you guys wanna see that, let us know which games you're interested in down below, and make sure you guys have those notifications enabled. And we just got a score back, and wow, I was not expecting this. The Note 20 Ultra is getting more than 100,000 more points, close to 120,000 more than our iPhone. So if we look at just the CPU, that is beating out the iPhone, which is interesting because Geekbench 5 didn't. And then we look at the graphics is actually doing better as well. And in the little gaming section, we could tell that it was running smoother. Now, this is the part that really gets me. Going down to the memory, the score on the Note 20 Ultra is almost twice as good. Now, for the first part, we have a difference in RAM. We have 4 gigs of RAM on the iPhone compared to 12 on the Note. And let me tell you, that 4 gig limit is annoying on the iPhone. I keep coming up to apps that are closing on me automatically, especially when I go to take photos or if I have multiple apps open. It is annoying. You don't have an issue with the Note 20. And not only is the speed really fast, but the storage internally, the ROM section right here, we go from 4,000 read to 26,000. The memory in here, the storage is ultra fast, and the write speed from 3,000 to 10,600. And then the random access is also from 2,600 to 15,000. Samsung put in the latest chips in here, better than the S20 Ultra, good improvement over that, and it definitely shows. Now, as far as the UX, the smoothness, it's very similar, slightly better on the Note. Of course, they're not factoring in the display, and when you have that 120 hertz, everything feels much smoother and much quicker and snappier. Realistically though, both of these are gonna do a fantastic job, and if you're gonna keep a phone for say 3, 4, 5 years, the iPhone's probably the way to go. It has software updates, it's gonna still keep performing really nicely. Now, let's go ahead and get into the cameras. We started out with the camera bumps, we're gonna talk about that now. This thing looks really nice. It has a 108 megapixel camera system, just like the S20 Ultra. It has 10 on the front, which is weird. It's a little bit less than 4K, so they're upsampling it. And we have that super zoom camera. The iPhone's limited to 10 times zoom, so here's a comparison between the two at 10 times. Of course, the iPhone also has the deep fusion tech, so let me know which one of these looks better. Here's a series of images. You guys take a look and let me know what looks best. We're gonna be doing a detailed, unbiased, blind comparison between these two. Those are always so much fun to shoot and to record for you guys, so make sure you guys have those notifications enabled to get a true detailed sense of how these two stack up. Before I give you guys my final conclusion, there are 2 unique features with both of these phones that I have to mention. The iPhone has the Apple ecosystem behind it. Works great with my MacBooks, works great with my Apple Watch. People love it, they're stuck in that system, and that's a definite plus, even if it has a lot of other downfalls. The Note 20, it has the S Pen. Now I have to be honest, I usually only use this for the first maybe week or so, and then I end up using my notes like regular phones. I've done that ever since the original Note. A lot of people love this though. If you're somebody that wants to draw, you want to write, this thing is excellent having that capability, and Samsung has now updated this with extremely little lag. This matches up to the basically the iPad Pro now with this 120 hertz screen. You guys could see Compared to the Samsung tablets, this is way better. At least until that S7 Plus comes out and it will match up with this. But if you're somebody that can appreciate the S Pen, that is definitely a huge bonus. Now let's get into the final conclusion. What do I think about these two phones? Well, if you're not stuck in the Apple ecosystem, I really like the Note. I love the way it looks. I love the way it feels. I love that it's lightweight, even though the screen is huge. It comes in at $1,300. You do get double the storage, but along with that, you get the 5G capability, which is really nice. The two things that really bug me about my iPhone is the RAM. I'm a power user, and there's 4 gigs is just not enough, and the fact that the modem is just quite a bit slower, noticeably slower than the Samsung phones, especially with 5G. We have sub 6 here, it's about twice as fast, and then it gets a better reception as well, which is a big deal. So I'm really looking forward to the next week, at least the next week, maybe permanently, switching over to the Note 20 and being able to use this device. So make sure you guys are subscribed and have those notifications enabled for the great videos that we have upcoming. This has been Max, and I'll see you in the next video.